Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, young Fred. How are you today?
I'm okay. It's Wednesday, September 25th. The world is looking good.
I don't know about the world looking good. It's kind of interesting. I've been watching all the comments on the clips from the UN responses. Did you notice that Milei from Argentina ripped into the UN?
No, I didn't.
Oh
I didn't
yeah,
see any of it. Yeah.
he took issue with their agenda, their focus. He said it's all wrong. It's not. We are not what we were
Professed to
originally
be.
designed to be, and it's worth a look to look it up.
I
But
did
this
see a
guy has.
headline, and I don't know who it was from, but basically said, "Why do we even come to the UN? Why do we even join the UN? What's the purpose?" So maybe that was in reference to his speech.
Yeah, that might have been him. It might have been
Yeah.
him saying that, for all I know.
Yeah.
I just saw. I sort of glossed over the clip that I saw. I really want to look at it more in depth, but Maria and I started talking about it. I said, I really wish they'd move it to someplace like, I don't know, Gaza or Sudan or something like that. Because these diplomats, they come in, they live, you know,
Yeah.
Park Avenue, First Avenue, all these hard. They love these trips to New York. They park anywhere they want. I would like to see them do that in one
Yeah.
of these
In places
countries.
where they really need help. Yeah.
Yeah, we could
See
turn
what
that
it's like.
into we could
Yeah.
turn that into a like 75-story apartments for immigrants or something like that. I mean, we could do something with the property other than what's there. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
I remember being there one time at the UN dining room with Alec McMurtry, and we were talking about, well, the Italian approach to this and the Swiss. And Alex said, this is not really the place, the venue for all these xenophobic conversations. And it was right. The UN bar was the only place that's open on election day. Did you know that they close bars? Or they used to, and I don't know if they still do.
I don't
They
think
used
they
to,
do, but
yeah, they used to close bars on election day, and the
right.
only bar open was the UN bar in New York.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody needs that. That's like the liquor stores and the bars. The liquor stores were the only things open during COVID. So
and well, that's true. Yeah,
that's right.
we know what our priorities are as a
No
society.
gyms, no churches, but liquor stores. Right.
So I'm looking at the world, and I know for months now, I guess we've been talking about the dollar capping off and seeing the highs of the dollar. And the dollar's
Mhm.
off significantly, as you pointed out at the last call since then. I don't know what, it's got to be off 5%, I would think, or 3%,
It
maybe
depends on
since,
the pair, but yeah, we've had some
since
big
the
moves.
highs. Um,
Euro above 112. I saw this morning.
but it struck me that at a time when we used to see traditional inflows into the dollar when geopolitical risk went up, we haven't seen that.
Right.
I mean, Hezbollah and the Israelis and what's going on with has been going on with Hamas, rockets fired into Israel, Russia into Ukraine, the Houthis blocking the shipping. All that's happening, and you would see hot flows into the dollar as a flight to quality there. How's it happened?
Well, I think all of that changed when I guess you would say we restricted the flow with what went on in the Russians. We had restricted the flow with the Iranians. So all of these people, when I first got in the market, it was the Swiss franc. Everybody flowed into the Swiss franc, and
Yeah,
then when they relaxed the Swiss banking regulations and they opened it up, then the Swiss franc was no longer the safe haven, and the dollar became the safe haven because of the capital markets and where you could park things. But I think what happened, and I guess it was 3 4 years ago with Putin and the Ukraine. There's all of these stories about the oligarchs having their money seized and their assets seized, and I think that was the beginning of a sell-off in the bond market, where you had some huge countries, and the rumor was China saying, "Why are we parking our money here when they could just shut us down at any time?" So I think that's a bigger reason why we're not seeing those capital flows at the dollar and the strength of the dollar.
well, you just made a point about when the dollar started to become the attractive uh,
Hmm.
vehicle from the Swiss franc. And it just so happened that that was when we went from negative real rates to positive real rates. Volcker's actions eclipsed
Right.
the rate of inflation. So you had real returns. And going back to, I guess, 1981, 80, you started to see capital flows into the dollar because you had a real rate of return. And that's just happened again. That happened a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now, when the Fed tightened and we saw real rates of return. We went from negative real rates to positive real rates. We should have seen a capital flow into the dollar on that basis. We didn't see it. And we should see a capital flow based on geopolitical considerations, and we're not seeing it. So I think the dollar's weaker than the rate suggests.
So there has been some money that's coming in that's offsetting the selling that we're presuming is going on, the weakness that's in the dollar. If it stayed simple, or if it stayed the same or came off a bit, you think it's more pronounced than that. The weakness is more pronounced because it should be much higher.
Well, there are reasons to buy the
Yeah.
dollar,
Yeah.
and the dollar hasn't been bought.
Yeah,
That's,
I
that's
think
where I come out.
yeah, I think it's the problem of restricting or seizing those flows that are not making it the safe haven currency anymore. And I don't know what is. I guess that's where people are moving to gold.
I guess we sort of disagree then. I would say that the bigger factor is the real rates of return and rates over interest. And despite all the reasons to buy the dollar, they aren't buying it, even though we got real rates of return.
Yeah, but even if you get real rates of return, if you're afraid that you're not going to get your principal back, it's really it doesn't matter.
Well, have we reached that point? You think
Well,
that's
I
where we
think
are?
some of the after some of the oligarchs may feel that way, where they got their yachts seized and some other assets seized, and that they feel, this could
Maybe
happen
so,
to me.
but don't lose sight of the fact that as we inflate, you're getting incrementally less and less back.
Yeah,
I mean, over a period of 10 years, you get you've lost maybe 40% of your return versus, commodities or gold, or some of the harder assets.
I was talking to somebody this morning about gold, and saying how he says I don't understand it. He says it doesn't pay dividends. It costs money to store. Yeah, it keeps going up. He says you look at gold over the last 40 years, and it just goes one way. I said, yeah, it stalls every now and then, but gold is the only true store of value. If you have any fear in the world, you go to gold. He says, yeah.
Somebody said, it might have been J.P. Morgan, I don't know. I'd have to ask my friend Michael, because he knows the quote. But the quote was, gold is the only true currency, everything else is debt.
Yeah,
and that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in an environment now where debt is changing.
yeah. And we're still seeing, with all of this going on, we still see the rally back up in Bitcoin, back above 63,000. I saw this morning.
My problem with Bitcoin. I think it's AI. I think AI threatens Bitcoin, but I guess there are other forms of crypto that are less suspect. Is it Ethereum?
Ethereum is yeah, it's a different.
That's
yeah,
really
it's
gained. I don't know enough about Bitcoin to really argue about it.
about the digital currencies. Yeah, not necessarily. Bitcoin is one of the digital currencies, and there's many.
My only concern is that the algorithms are going to be much easier to find when AI becomes more pervasive. So I got out of all the Bitcoin exposure completely as a result of that. So the dollar is probably the trade here, and the yield curve.
Yeah, same themes. Inflation themes, weak dollar. I think that's all the same. So what we've been talking about for a while, it's starting to really click in. And reading the newsletter that we read this morning, he's talking about this being a real long-term trade, a negative dollar trade.
Well, I think his argument there was he's front-running China,
Yeah,
and that's valid. I mean, you and I don't pay enough attention to China, but that's a big capital flow.
right.
I read a really good article yesterday. I should send it to you about the unit this BRIC currency.
Hmm.
And maybe we'll talk more about that in depth at some of the other calls. But that's coming. We're starting to see some really interesting information about the unit and BRIC.
Yeah, and I know you sent something over, and I started to read it this morning, and there's a lot to comprehend there. And you have to have faith in the unit, and you have to have faith in those BRIC governments to make that work. And the article that I read, as you sent over, kept coming back. The Kissinger line: "Who do I call if I have a problem with Europe? Who do I call if I have a problem with the BRICS?" And right now, from the extent of that article, it seems like it's all Russia.
Yeah, yeah,
And in the face of what's going on in the Ukraine and Russia, their position globally, I don't know if the rest of the world is buying into it, but certainly the BRIC currencies seem to. BRIC
well,
countries seem to.
that's true, and that's a weakness for sure. And I think they'll address that over time. And this is a trade over time.
Hmm.
But the one thing they have done is, I'm getting an echo now. The one thing they have done is they've established a payment system. They've established a replacement to SWIFT and to chips. They've built the infrastructure before the launch, and that's good to see. The other thing is they're backed 40% by gold, and
Right.
60% by commodity basket. Now, to your point, who do you call if you want to redeem that? And what kind of faith do you get that you can actually redeem it? You
Right.
call up and say, I want to redeem my bricks for this basket. And they say, well, comrade, the gates are closed, and they have to adapt that credibility over time.
Yeah.
They got a long way to go before they replace the dollar as reserve currency, but as a trade currency amongst themselves, that they're going to be a factor. And that will have a lot more immediacy. They'll start to settle. India will buy stuff from China and use the unit, or rather than the rupee, because they can print the rupee and they can't print the unit. And the unit's got a hard back. So they'll start to accept the unit over and above their bilateral trade agreements right now.
And there's got to be
weakens the
some
dollar.
conversion back, right, to your local currency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They also talked about something to replace the IMF SDRs. They have their own version of an SDR that they're producing. So we're going to see over time where it goes. But I think long term there'll be a factor. There'll be a major factor. Because each central bank, each global central bank, with the possible exception of Argentina, seems to be pursuing the same path. Let's just reflate. We'll
Right.
print more, and the dollar reflates, and we have comparable levels of inflation to measure, as opposed to one inflating and one not. Central banks have basically bought into the race to the bottom.
Yeah.
So that's the
think-
trade, I guess.
I think that's been going on for a while. I told you I thought that the old G7 model, when they used to have those quarterly or semi-annually meetings, was to pick who was, as you coined it, queen for a day. Who's going to take the bullet and allow everyone else to grow on your back.
Yeah. Well, we used to have some leadership there.
Right.
I mean, we'd send a guy like Baker, who would
Right.
say, this is really what's going to happen, folks, because this is where we're going, and you could follow, or you could stand by. Those days are over for us, at least now. For now,
Right.
this administration doesn't have that level, both politically and I guess militarily, and I guess I guess you could argue it's the same thing. I saw. I guess it was who was the previous Secretary of State under Trump? What's his name? He was a congressman. Then he was Homeland Security. Then he was Secretary of State. You know who I mean? Trump Secretary of State.
I'm trying to think.
I could see his face.
I'm drawing a blank.
Drawing a blank too. But anyway, it was him who said he said, the reason why diplomatic solutions are not working is we don't back them up militarily. diplomacy is only as good as the faith in your follow up, and nobody believes we're going to follow up. Somebody says we're going to do this, we say don't, and they do, and we don't do anything about it. We don't enforce our red lines.
Mike Pompeo.
Pompeo, yes, thank you.
Mike Pompeo.
That would have kept me up all night. I would have been Googling.
But to that point, I remember Mac. You remember Mac way back
Oh, sure,
when,
yeah.
right? Mac's point when the euro first came out is they're doing this backwards. They're merging economies. They should be merging militaries, and then the economies will come on the back of that.
It's
Merge
similar
the
to my
Europe-
point. My point then was a little different.
Yeah.
They've got a political union. They've got an economic union, but not a political union.
Right. Right.
Some guy in Italy could come to power saying, we're getting screwed, so therefore I'm going to pursue this path, and the euro disintegrates.
That was
it
the
was
point back, I guess, 97, 98. So 27 years ago.
But they've stood the test of time. I mean,
Yeah.
I can't argue with 25 years of survival.
Right.
I don't know if I knew somebody who worked on that project when they created the euro. Who worked on the technological side of it,
Mm-hmm.
and he had advocated that they build an algorithm if somebody wants to back out. How do they do it? How do they recreate? And they shut them down. They would not put the algorithm in. They would
Right.
not. Yeah,
We don't want a back door.
technology would not support such an action.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. That's good stuff. All right. I guess we could call it for a day and see what
Yeah.
happens the rest of the day. But short term in terms of the stock market, no direction. It's up. It's down. It's everywhere, anywhere. It's a fool's game.
Well, yeah, I think the fact that we're going down in the face of a 50 basis point move is not a positive sign. Maybe it's my bias, but I don't think that's, we haven't had a sustained rally since the 50 basis point cut. With the no follow through, I guess that's a better point.
Yeah.
Anyway, have a good day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
You too. Thanks.